Capricorn rising, it basically means that you have Capricorn in the first house of your birth chart. So the rising sign, aka ascendant sign, aka first house, is all about the self. It's all about the body, you know, how you act. The first house represents your body. It represents your appearance. It represents your behavior. It represents, you know, your relationship with yourself, your self-identity. You know, who are you at your core? What is your self-esteem like? How do you carry yourself? This is all first house energy. So having Capricorn in the first house is very serious. So Capricorn is a sign that is associated with gradually working their way to the top. Appearance-wise, a lot of Capricorn risings might have felt very insecure about their appearance while you were younger. As you get older, you get more and more confident. So if you are a young Capricorn rising watching right now and you feel a little bit on the insecure side, trust me that as you get older, it will feel better. This is because you have Saturn ruling over your first house. Saturn is the planet of time. It is the planet of lessons. It's, you know, slow and steady stability. And the thing about Saturn is that having it ruling over the first house is that over time, you're gonna feel more and more stable from the inside out. You definitely wanna take a look at your own birth chart right now, pull it up and look at your Saturn. Look at the house that it's in, and the topics of that house are gonna give you a lot more insight as to your behavior, as to your appearance, things like that. I've noticed that Capricorn risings tend to be, you know, they have very prominent like bone structure, very prominent teeth. This doesn't mean that you guys have perfect teeth all the time, just very prominent teeth. Like, you know, when you're talking to someone, their eye gaze might like fall to your teeth, maybe because they're very nice, maybe because they stand out some type of way, or just very, you know, prominent bone structure, you know, very prominent collarbones and like cheekbones and all of that good stuff. I've personally never really seen a Capricorn rising who wasn't attractive. That's just my personal opinion. Everyone else's can be different, but here's some celebrities that actually have a Capricorn rising. So Ariana Grande, she is a Capricorn rising, and she's got her Saturn in Pisces in her third house of short-term learning, communication, things like that. Now, we've also got Olivia Rodrigo, who's a Capricorn rising, and her Saturn is in Gemini in her sixth house of work and health. And Zac Efron has a Capricorn rising with his Saturn in the 12th house in Sagittarius. So obviously all of these different celebrities have their own flavor, and that's basically what the chart ruler does. The chart ruler is the most important planet in your birth chart because it kind of sets the tone for everything else. So you definitely want to go in, if you're a Capricorn rising, look at your Saturn, look at the aspects that it's making to other planets. Are there planets really close? Are there planets, you know, making an opposition? Or, you know, just go in and look at that. And then obviously I won't be there to like break it down for you. Obviously I can break it down for you. If you'd like a reading, you can get one on my website, destinyjanae.com. It's linked down below, But the short version of this is that you can always go in and Google that aspect with your chart ruler, and there's pretty much an article for everything. So you would be surprised how accurate those little small articles can be sometimes if you're not looking for a reading. But anyways, directly opposite of the first house is the seventh house. So the seventh house in traditional astrology represents marriage. In my opinion, you know, the way that I use astrology, I use seventh house as more of the other. So first house would be the self, seventh house is the other. Now, seventh house largely does deal with like romantic relationships and, you know, your marriages, your spouses, things like that. Having a Cancer seventh house, basically your descendant is here. The descendant is directly opposite of the ascendant, which, you know, is your rising sign, which I just got finished explaining. Now the descendant is kind of like how you act in relationships, and it's the energy that you tend to find yourself pulled towards. So if you don't have a partner who acts out the descendant, then you might act this way. Let me give you an example. So having Cancer in the seventh house means that you really need like a warm, inviting type of lover or partner. You really enjoy people who make you feel at home, who feel very cozy, who are, you know, emotionally safe for you to open up. Since you have a Cancer descendant, you can either be that warm and fuzzy person in the relationship, and if you aren't that person, then you're looking for that person in a relationship. Make sense? So for example, you meet a partner who's very warm and fuzzy. Now you're going to complement their Cancer energy and bring your Capricorn energy to the table. You know, provide that stability for them, somewhere for them to be comfortable. Because really Cancer and Capricorn, they're sister signs. They're very similar to each other, even though it doesn't seem like it. But you also have your seventh house ruled by the moon. So you definitely want to go ahead in your own birth chart, look at your moon, look at the house it's in, look at the aspects that it's making to other planets. And this is going to tell you, it's going to give you a lot more information on your partners and the type of partners that you are gravitating towards. Swords. Now, the thing about the moon is that it represents your emotions, your temperament over time. So someone who has a Sagittarius moon is going to, be attracted to a different type of partner than someone who has a Taurus moon. Your own emotional state is going to have a huge impact of the partners that you choose, and more likely than not, you're going to choose a partner who's going to directly reflect that emotional temperament of yours right back to you. Okay, so Capricorn risings also have Aquarius in the second house. Now, the second house rules over money. I kind of view it as your wallet. It rules over the money that you have. It also rules over your relationship to food, how you handle money. It also represents your morals. So having Aquarius in the second house is very interesting for the Capricorn rising, because Capricorn risings are typically very serious people, but having Aquarius in the second house, Aquarius is a very quote-unquote different sign. That's the stereotype of Aquarius, and obviously all of the signs have their own stereotype for a reason. That's because Aquarius energy is unlike any other, so you might spend money in a very different way than people might expect you to. Capricorn risings also might spend quite a bit of money on, technological advancements like electric cars, the latest technology. That's going to be the type of thing that you spend your money on. Now, if you were born in Generation Z, don't worry about this if you're not Gen Z, but if you're born in Gen Z, you most likely have Neptune and Uranus in this house. So Uranus is one of the rulers of Aquarius, and Uranus rules over very quick, sudden change, very innovative. Like, it's not quick change that's reckless. It's more of like this very calm, calculated, but quick, change. It's like very insightful, immediate type of change. So very random things can happen to your finances with Uranus being here, whether it's for the good or the bad. You definitely want to go in and look at the aspects from Uranus, but also having Neptune in the second house. So Neptune is very creative, right? But the thing about this creativity with Neptune is that sometimes people can get lost in the sauce of it. So having Neptune in the second house can make Capricorn risings a little confusing about the money that they're spending. Where is it going? What are you spending it on? And Neptune also represents addiction. On a more serious note for this video, I definitely want to advise Capricorn risings of spending too much of their money on substances like alcohol or drugs or something like that, because that will definitely drain your wallet. And it's something I just see you guys being predisposed to if you're a Gen Z. Definitely go take a look at your birth chart to see if that's where you have your Uranus and Neptune, but if you're Gen Z, you most likely have it there. Now, your second house is also being ruled by Saturn. So Saturn, of course, is your chart ruler, which deals over, the way that you view yourself. So the way that you view yourself and your own self-esteem, your own self-confidence, the way that you're carrying yourself is going to have a huge impact on how you spend money. So even though Capricorn risings tend to be very serious people, you guys have this very emotional type of a relationship with the way that you spend money. If you're not feeling too good about yourself, you might spend a bit too much very randomly with that Uranus energy. Directly opposite of the second house is the eighth house. The eighth house, if the second house is your wallet, then the eighth house is your partner's wallet. And it's more than just that. Let me get into it. The eighth house also represents spirituality, and it also represents these really soul-bearing sexual experiences. If you're a waitress, your tips, that would be other people's money coming to you. So you definitely want to look at your eighth house. If you're an investor, if you put an investment, you definitely want to look at eighth house transits to gauge when you'll see a return on a certain investment, or when you should invest in something like that. It is a house of sudden gains and sudden losses, especially with your eighth house opposing, giving that conflicting energy between your Uranus and Neptune. I would definitely advise most Capricorn risings who are Gen Z to be a little bit more careful with your finances. And even though you might be investing in all these new technological things, you definitely want to be careful about spending too much. You always want to have some sort of backup plan, especially because Pluto is going to be moving into Aquarius in the next few years, which is hugely going to change technology and the way that we invest and a lot of stuff dealing with cryptocurrency. So it's very good to have like a backup plan right now. But either way, Capricorn risings do have Leo in the eighth house, meaning that you might have a partner who is a very extravagant spender who kind of wants to show off their money, but also, who's very proud of their money. Or you might even be the type of person who is proud of the money that you receive from others. For example, if you're an artist, you might get like album sales. That would all fall under your Leo 8th house. You also might want to look at your sun for more insight. Obviously, the aspects and the house that your sun is in is going to tell you a lot of stuff, but the house that you have Leo in is the area that you shine the most in life, because you know that's where the sun naturally likes to be. I have a feeling that Capricorn risings are no stranger to having people spend lots of money on them or spending lots of money on other people. Capricorn risings also have a Pisces third house. So the third house is all about how you think and communicate, and also short-term travels and contracts, siblings, neighbors, things like that. But overall, having a third house that is ruled by both Jupiter and Neptune, the way that you communicate is very emotional. It's very heartfelt. It's that Piscean energy of being able to relate to anybody, because Piscean energy, Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac, so it has a piece of each of the signs, which is why Pisces tend to get along with so many people. So even though as a Capricorn rising, you're definitely, you know, your temperament is very serious, you know, you're very mature about life, the way that you communicate with people, you can almost get lost in conversation with people, but you're also really good at empathizing as well. And being ruled by Jupiter, Jupiter is the planet of good luck, of abundance, you know, it wants to spoil you, so you definitely have this sort of radiant way of communicating, generally like an optimistic style of like interacting with other people. Also, having Neptune ruling the third house as well can kind of mean that you can be a very creative person. You might share a lot of creative ideas with other people, with your friends. Directly opposite the third house is the ninth house. The ninth house represents long-term travel. What do you truly believe about life? You know, it's sometimes referred to as the house of God, because it represents, you know, all of your beliefs. What do you truly feel about the world? Like, is there life after death? Like some of these core beliefs. Ninth house also represents, you know, education, higher learning, college particularly. So anytime Capricorn risings have like a ninth house transit, aka Virgo, you guys might find yourself, you know, changing something up about school, or like learning something very significant, or even going on a vacation that might be somewhere pretty far away. Now, having Virgo in the ninth house means that whenever you guys travel and whenever you guys are learning like a huge new skill, you guys are very particular. Like, you want to know everything there is. You want to know everything about the travel itinerary. You want, you know, all of your trips to be perfectly planned out. You know, you don't want to be guessing about anything. You want everything as close to perfect as possible. And you also feel that way whenever you're learning. Whenever Capricorn risings are learning something new, you guys go all in. It is all or nothing, especially whenever it comes to your college experience. I have a feeling that, you know, a lot of Capricorn risings, if you realize that school wasn't good for you, or school wasn't meant for you, because it's not meant for everybody, you might have realized that very quickly, because you see what it would take, you know, to do what you want to do, and you're like, no, I want to hone in on my craft. I either want it to be perfect or I want it to have nothing. Capricorn risings also have an Aries fourth house. So the fourth house is all about the home, the family, and your personal life. So it's not hidden like the 8th house and the 12th houses are, but it's very private. It's at the very bottom of your chart. So very little people know you this intimately. So, you know, your closest family members, your closest friends, people who feel like family to you are gonna see this side of you. So in your home life, you might be the type of person who's a little bit more argumentative with your family, or you might even have a family who is all, you know, into some sort of fitness. You know, that's what Aries does rule over after all. But you also might have just had like a home environment where arguments were, you know, were very easy to happen in the home. And this is because Mars is ruling over your 4th house. Mars is what we call in astrology as a malefic, which kind of brings about a bit of trouble wherever it's placed and wherever, you know, the houses are that are ruled by Mars. But depending on whether you're born in the daytime or the nighttime, this might be more or less of an issue. Having Aries here might mean that when you were a kid, you might have been really like independent as a person and always had like their head on straight, always knew exactly what you were doing ever since you were a little kid. That's also like that 4th house Aries energy. Now, directly opposite the Aries in the 4th house is the 10th house. The 10th house is the most seen area of your birth chart. It's literally seen by everyone, everything. It is that curated version of you that you just throw up into the public and everyone gets to see it. Obviously not literally throwing up, but you know, it's whenever you're posting on social media, that's your 10th house being activated. When you're going to a party, you know, 10th house representing career, public image, reputation. So having a Libra 10th house, people definitely see you as someone who's very diplomatic. Libra is also ruled by Venus. So you want to feel very comfortable in your career. You know, that's what Venus rules over, you know, comfort, things that feel good. Obviously, Libra is a very beautiful sign. It's kind of like that curated beauty. Other people might see you as someone who's very attractive, especially if you have Libra placements, which actually all 3 of the celebrities that I mentioned earlier, Ariana Grande, Olivia Rodrigo, and Zac Efron, they all actually have Libra placements. So this can also speak to like using your beauty in a strategic way to advance your career. Libras also always tend to know what to say. Very good at networking for your career as well. You definitely want to go ahead and check out what Venus is doing in your chart, and it's going to give you a lot more insight on your career. But either way, the two Venus ruled houses in your birth chart are your 10th house and your 5th house. So the 10th house ruling over your career and the 5th house ruling over your creative projects kind of leads me to believe that a lot of Capricorn risings, despite being very like serious people, tend to actually rely on your creative abilities to actually generate income or like generate success in your career in some way. Now, the 5th house is where you have Taurus, which is another Venus ruled sign. So the 5th house is all about fun, it's all about creativity, it's all about children, and it's all about dating and lighthearted sex. So it's not that soul-bearing sex that I was talking about earlier with, you know, Leo being in your 8th house. It's more about this very fun type of fling type of energy. Now, having Taurus in the 5th house just means you really want to be comfortable within your little fling. You really want to be comfortable and create, you know, stability with your creative projects as well. Taurus is the sign of money. So having the sign of money in your 5th house as well might mean that you might make quite a bit of money through your creative projects. So you definitely, like I said, with the 10th house, you definitely want to go ahead and check out what your Venus is doing in your birth chart. It's going to give you a lot more insight. But either way, you also might have a child who has a Taurus placement or who kind of behaves like a Taurus, who is very chill, but whenever they're provoked, they can get really angry really quickly. But it takes a while for that anger to build, but it appears quick to other people. That's the type of like child that you might have eventually, or that might be the type of relationship that you have with your children. The 5th house can rule over quite a bit of things, but either way, with it also ruling over, you know, fun in your life, Capricorn risings might find themselves just enjoying having fun at home. You know, Taurus loves home energy, you know, creating that stability, you know, an environment that they can control. So more often than not, I definitely see Capricorn risings tending to stay home to have fun, or like having, you know, really romantic, you know, experiences while still at home. Directly opposite the 5th house is the 11th house, which rules over your long-term friends. It rules over the communities that you belong to. So for example, if you belong to the astrology community, if you belong to the One Direction fandom or something like that, that would all be in your 11th house. Whenever you meet people who have placements in your 11th house, it is going to feel very intense for you. That's because you have Scorpio in the 11th house. Scorpio is ruled by both Mars and Pluto. So having Mars ruling over your 11th house might mean that you're a little bit more susceptible to, you know, getting in a lot of arguments, even with your long-term friends. But I have a feeling that whatever these arguments are, they kind of bring about these huge changes in your life, because your 11th house is also ruled by Pluto. Pluto rules over your extremes. So, you know, having all of it or having none of it. So more often than not for Capricorn risings, you're either best friends with someone or you're just not their friend at all. You just have these really intense, deep relationships with your friends. But also every time you know, make a new friend or, you know, let go of a friend, it's almost like you enter into this huge like regeneration process where you kind of come in, you kind of come out the other side a bit of a different person than you entered in. But either way, you're gonna feel right at home with people who have Scorpio placements, because it is going to feel very solid to you. Now, let's go ahead to the 6th house. So the 6th house represents, you know, your daily routine. It represents your work, the things that you do on a daily basis. You know, it represents your pets and your health, as well as your coworkers. So having Gemini in the 6th house kind of means that you need to be stimulated throughout the day. Capricorn rising might find themselves having a lot of trouble sitting still. That's that energy, that's that Gemini energy of like needing to constantly do something. You guys might feel the need to overstimulate yourself in order to feel not bored. But either way, Gemini energy is also very creative. It's very adaptable. So no matter what's going on in your daily routine, you can almost kind of always adapt to it. No matter what's changing, no matter if you're traveling, no matter what the situation is, you can always learn something new from whatever's happening around you. And you're always absorbing that information like a sponge. So you've got Mercury ruling over your 6th house, which, you know, rules over thinking and communication. So like I said, constantly observing, you know, what's going on around you, constantly learning from it, and constantly applying that information to your life. Now, directly opposite the 6th house is the 12th house. So Capricorn risings, if you are a member of Gen Z, you probably have Pluto and Chiron in your 12th house. Not everyone does, but some people do. But either way, having Pluto in the 12th house can kind of bring about these like triggers that are very unconscious to you, because the 12th house rules over mental health. It rules over the things that you can't see, your subconscious. Like, even if you're looking for it, you might not see the solution immediately. The 12th house also rules over, you know, your mental health and also isolation to a certain point. Having Pluto in the 12th house for people who are Gen Z can kind of mean that you guys can almost kind of like self-isolate as a way to like cope with the changes that happen in your life. Capricorn risings also have Jupiter ruling over this house though. So Jupiter in general is a pretty optimistic place for Pluto to be. So, you know, Pluto also rules over power and control. So you definitely want to make sure that you're, you know, all of your opinions are your own, because people can either assert their power over you, you know, if they know a little bit more about your subconscious than you do. They might assert that dominance over you, but you also might find yourself taking control of other people's subconscious. Your subconscious and, you know, the state that you are mentally is going to have a huge influence over the way that you communicate. And, you know, especially whenever you travel, like these short-term distances, you're definitely going to want to make sure that you're in a good mood whenever you're driving, whenever you're traveling. Jupiter rules both your 12th house and your 3rd house. So 12th house being subconscious mind and mental health, and 3rd house being communication, the way that you talk to people, and short-term traveling. If you'd like to get a personal reading, you can get one on my website, destinyjanae.com, which is linked in the down below. But otherwise, thank y'all for watching, and make sure you like, comment, and subscribe.